Shabbat Shalom, family and friends. We are on the 49th Torah portion named Kitetse, which means when you go out. This week's Torah portion takes place in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 21, verse 10, through chapter 25, verse 19. It also includes a reading in the prophets in the book of Isaiah, chapter 54, verses 1 through 10. It also includes Psalms, chapters 127 through 130, and in the Renewed Covenant, in the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 27 through 30, as well as in 1 Corinthians, chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. This Torah portion is packed, literally. It contains 74 commandments, more than any other portion in the Torah. And from a percentage standpoint, we're talking about 12% of all of the 613 meets vote in just one Torah portion. It covers everything from civil laws to moral and ethical guidance. Some of these laws feel intuitive, like returning lost property, punishing rape, being honest in business, not kidnapping. These are the kinds of rules that help build trust and safety in any society. But then there are laws that might make you pause, like don't charge interest to your fellow Israelite. In today's world, that sounds almost impossible. We think about our economy. The average American household carries over $104,000 in debt. Now, most of that would be in mortgages, but still, it's debt. And about 1 in 4 Americans spend more money than they earn. Credit cards, loans, and buy now, pay later deals are everywhere. In fact, we've built a culture that thrives on debt, but it's fragile. And one unexpected event, and the whole house of cards can collapse. It's interesting to think that in many versions of the Lord's Prayer, Jesus says, "Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors." And in many, the same word for sin is also used for debt. The Torah's approach, though, reminds us that we should not profit off of someone else's hardship. It's a call to build communities based on mutual support, not exploitation. Okay, and I'll say that again because I think it's important. It's a call that we should build our community based on mutual support, not exploitation. I grew up, I was blessed to grow up going to a church that really strived to help others in need. A lot of the people that came to the church were people that recently joined, or I actually recently moved to Ohio from different places. And the church really rallied around helping others in terms of finding an automobile, finding a job, finding housing. In fact, next to the church was a house that the church owned that they would let others that were in need stay in to kind of help them get get on their feet. Now, one of the most beautiful and surprising commandments in this Torah portion is if you come across a bird's nest, don't take the mother with the young. Send the mother away first. And at first glance, it seems minor and it could seem confusing, but it's actually profound. It's really teaching, helping us to teach compassion even towards animals. It's about not causing unnecessary suffering. And what's interesting about this commandment is that it comes with a promise. That promise is so that it may be well with you and you may prolong your days. That's the same reward for honoring your parents. So clearly, God sees mercy in small things as deeply important. And we should think about that. When we practice kindness in everyday moments, whether it's with animals, whether it's with siblings, with our coworkers, we're shaping our character. And we become people who act justly in bigger matters too. Remember, compassion is not optional, it's foundational. Now, throughout the Torah portion, there are messianic echoes in the laws. Some laws in Kitetse carry messianic symbolism. They point toward or point forward to Yeshua and his mission. So one of the commandments was the captive woman. This is a woman that a man may have found desirable, and he takes her into his home. Okay. Now he finds her desirable, so it was forbidden for for a man to just rape a woman, which was common back then. But especially during that wartime. But she must be treated with dignity and given time to mourn the loss of her family and the place where she lived. Now, the same way Yeshua doesn't force himself on us. He redeems us gently, restoring our dignity before inviting us into covenant. There is a commandment related to the rebellious son that is condemned to death. You know, and we think about in the new covenant that Yeshua, though innocent, was treated as a rebellious son. He bore our punishment, and this was the substitutionary atonement that was provided for us. There's almost an unusual verse in this Torah portion talking about hung on a tree. That hanging on a tree brings a curse. And what's interesting is Paul quotes this in Galatians 3:13, that Messiah redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. And that ties directly to this verse that's in this Torah portion. In fact, what's interesting about that passage is that some people use that passage as a means of, you see how like you're cursed if you try to keep God's law. And what they're missing is that if we're basing our salvation on keeping God's law, then by breaking one of those laws, it brings us under a curse. So, but we do not keep God's laws because we're trying to earn our salvation. We keep God's laws because we love God, and this is our way of demonstrating our love to God. And so, in this case, we are not keeping God's law to keep our salvation. And so here we see, and it's evidence that Christ took that curse upon himself of all of our sins and made that substitutionary atonement. Another interesting item here is related to building a parapet or guardrail around your house. That would be kind of your balcony area, where it's higher up. And the point of that was to prevent bloodshed. Like, you don't want someone accidentally falling off your roof of your house. And in here it speaks to, we could see how Yeshua is our spiritual guardrail that's protecting us from harm and guiding us safely. I spoke earlier about the mother bird, but Yeshua spoke of God's care for sparrows. His teachings reflect the same ethic of compassion and protection. Now, the Torah portion ends with a command to remember Amalek. And Amalek, whose descendants really attacked Israel's stragglers when they were entering the promised land. And the Amalekites attacked those who were tired and those that were vulnerable. Now, Amalek was Esau's grandson. This is Jacob's brother. So Amalek was, what would that make him? That would make him Isaac's great grandson and Abraham's great great grandson. But Israel is told to blot out Amalek's memory once they have rest from their enemies. In fact, God commanded Saul to completely destroy the Amalekites. And if you remember, Saul disobeyed God by sparing King Agag, and he kept some of the spoils from the Amalekites. And that disobedience really led to God rejecting Saul as king. When the Amalekites, when they attacked Israel, it wasn't just a military ambush. It was a moral offense. It was a rejection of compassion and divine justice. They were attacking, the people that were vulnerable. These were the people that it was hard for them to keep up. And there was really no reason. There was no um there was no threat from the people that they attacked, but yet they just showed no mercy to that. And so when we think about, don't forget the Amalekites. I mean, it's really a call to stand against injustice, to protect those that are vulnerable. When we have a position of power, when we have, we have physical strength, and we have, emotional strength, even monetary means, to protect those that are vulnerable, to recognize and also resist against forces that oppose God's kingdom. It's not about vengeance. It's about moral clarity. Amalek, to me, represents cruelty without conscience. And we should remember how we don't become indifferent to what's going on in the world around us. Kitetse reminds us that God cares about the details. How we treat others, how we handle money, how we respond to suffering, even how we handle animals. These laws aren't just ancient rules, they're blueprints for a just and compassionate life. So I pray that as we enter this new week, that we would be mindful of that, and that we would just have compassion and have kindness. And by that our light would show, our light would shine, and that we would truly demonstrate we are the salt of this earth. So with that, I pray that God bless you and keep you, and Shabbat Shalom.